The phone rang at 11:30 on a Tuesday night, jolting me from my quarterly financial reports. 12 years of complete silence, and now my cousin Sarah's trembling voice cut through the darkness of my home office. She stammered through nervous apologies before explaining that the Thompson family reunion was happening next weekend at an exclusive beachfront rental in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. Every aunt, uncle, cousin, and grandchild would gather there except me. As she described the stunning oceanfront property with its private beach and infinity pool, my heart began racing with recognition. 6 months ago, I had purchased that exact address through my real estate investment company, Ocean Vista Properties. My own family was about to vacation in my secret property. I set down the phone and stared out at the Charleston skyline, remembering the devastating family meeting that destroyed everything 12 years ago. At 20 years old, I had discovered something that changed my life forever. My father, Robert Thompson, had spent 30 years building Thompson Construction into a regional powerhouse across South Carolina. We employed over 200 workers and handled million-dollar contracts for shopping centers, apartment complexes, and commercial buildings throughout the Southeast. But I found evidence that made my stomach turn. While reviewing payroll records for a college business class project, I discovered we were systematically underpaying immigrant workers by nearly 40% below minimum wage. These hard-working men and women were building luxury developments while earning barely enough to feed their families. Worse, I found invoices proving we used substandard concrete, cheaper electrical components, and inferior roofing materials while charging clients premium prices for top-quality construction. I spent weeks gathering documentation, believing my family would be grateful I had discovered these problems before they caused serious legal trouble. I imagined my father praising my diligence and immediately correcting these practices. Instead, when I presented my findings to him and my older brothers David and Michael during our monthly family business meeting, they stared at me like I had committed treason. David, then 32, and our head of operations slammed his coffee mug on the conference table. You have no idea how this industry actually works? Those workers are lucky to have jobs at all. And our materials meet minimum building codes, which is all that matters legally. Michael, our 30-year-old project manager, shook his head in disgust. You're going to destroy everything Dad built over some bleeding heart nonsense you learned in college. This is the real world, little brother. My father's reaction cut deepest. This man who had taught me about integrity and hard work looked at me with cold disappointment. Arthur, I thought we raised you better than this. You're talking about destroying our family's livelihood to satisfy some naive idealism. These practices are standard across the industry. But they were not standard for ethical companies, and I knew it. I had researched our competitors and found several firms that paid fair wages and used quality materials while maintaining healthy profit margins. I tried explaining this, but my family had already closed ranks against me. My mother Patricia entered the room during our heated discussion and immediately sided with her husband. She listened to my concerns with pursed lips before delivering her verdict. Arthur, you're attacking your own family. Your father has provided everything for us, and this company has given you every opportunity in life. This feels like betrayal. The confrontation escalated when I mentioned that I had documentation proving these practices violated federal labor laws and building safety regulations. I suggested we could gradually correct these issues without admitting wrongdoing, protecting both our workers and our clients while maintaining profitability. Instead, my father delivered an ultimatum that changed everything. You have two choices, son. You can stay silent about this supposed evidence, remain loyal to your family, and continue learning the business the right way. Or you can pursue this foolish crusade and lose your family forever. There will be no middle ground. The room fell silent as everyone waited for my response. I looked at each family member hoping someone would support doing the right thing. Instead, I saw united opposition and conditional love based on my willingness to ignore serious ethical violations. I chose my conscience that day knowing it would cost me everything. Within a week, I had reported the violations to the South Carolina Department of Labor and the Occupational Safety and Health Administration. The investigations resulted in significant fines, mandatory wage corrections, totaling over $400,000, and required safety improvements costing another $200,000. My family's response was swift and absolute. They cut off all financial support, removed me from the company, payroll, banned me from all family events, and instructed extended family members to have no contact with me. I was suddenly responsible for my own college tuition, housing, and expenses while watching my former family prosper, and tell everyone in our community that I was an ungrateful son who had bitten the hand that fed me. I worked 3 jobs to finish my business degree: at the University of South Carolina morning shifts, at a campus coffee shop afternoon work, at a local construction company, and weekend jobs at a catering service. While my brothers lived in the family mansion and drove company trucks, I shared a tiny apartment with 2 roommates and rode a secondhand bicycle to class. The emotional pain was even worse than the financial struggle. I watched from a distance as my family celebrated holidays, graduations, and achievements without me. They acted as if I had never existed, erasing 20 years of shared memories to maintain their version of family loyalty. 3 years after my exile, Thompson Construction faced another investigation for the exact same violations I had originally reported. This time, multiple workers had been injured due to faulty electrical work, and several building inspectors had discovered structural problems linked to substandard materials. The resulting lawsuits, criminal charges, and settlements nearly drove the company into bankruptcy. My father aged 10 years and 6 months as he faced potential prison time and financial ruin. But even then, my family never acknowledged that my original warnings could have prevented their downfall. They blamed government overreach, dishonest employees, and bad luck, rather than admitting their practices had been wrong from the beginning. I read about their troubles in local newspapers and felt no satisfaction, only sadness that stubborn pride had prevented them from avoiding this entirely predictable disaster. After graduating with a 3.8 grade point average, despite working constantly, I started my own construction company with $1,200 in savings and an unshakable commitment to ethical business practices. I named it Coastal Dreams Development, determined to prove that treating workers fairly and using quality materials could create both success and integrity. My first contract was a small deck repair for an elderly widow named Margaret Patterson. Instead of charging her the standard $800 estimate, I discovered she was living on Social Security and reduced my fee to $300 while using the same high-quality materials. She was so grateful that she recommended me to her entire neighborhood association. Word spread quickly about the young contractor, who showed up on time, used premium materials, charged fair prices, and treated workers with respect. Within 6 months, I had hired my first employee, a skilled carpenter named Tony Rodriguez, whose previous employers had routinely cheated him out of overtime pay. I made sure Tony earned 15% above market rate and provided health insurance for his family. My reputation for integrity attracted high-end clients who valued quality over quick profits. I specialized in custom homes for successful professionals who wanted beautiful, durable construction from a company they could trust. Every project was completed on schedule, within budget, and with materials that exceeded building code requirements. By my 3rd year in business, I had 12 employees and contracts worth over $2 million annually. I reinvested every dollar of profit back into the company, living in a modest apartment while purchasing better equipment and expanding our capabilities. I studied property law, real estate investment, and hospitality management through evening courses at Charleston Community College planning for eventual diversification beyond construction. My breakthrough came when a prominent Charleston attorney hired me to build his family's vacation home in Kiowa Island. Jonathan Blackwell had researched dozens of contractors before choosing my company based on recommendations from 3 previous clients. The project was worth $600,000 and would establish my reputation in the luxury market. I treated the Blackwell project like my masterpiece, using imported Italian tiles, custom millwork, and energy-efficient systems that exceeded the client's specifications. When Hurricane Florence threatened the area during construction, I personally supervised securing the job site and protecting materials, even sleeping in my truck to ensure everything remained safe. The home was completed 2 weeks ahead of schedule with additional features I added at no extra cost. Jonathan Blackwell was so impressed that he recommended me to other attorneys, doctors, and business executives throughout the Charleston area. He also introduced me to real estate investment opportunities, explaining how successful contractors could build wealth through property acquisition and development rather than just construction services. Within 5 years of starting my company, I had expanded into real estate development, focusing on sustainable coastal properties that preserved natural beauty while providing luxury accommodations. My construction background gave me unique advantages in estimating costs, managing subcontractors, and ensuring quality throughout the development process. I learned that many vacation rental properties were poorly managed by owners who lived far away and relied on inexperienced property management companies. I saw an opportunity to create a vertically integrated business that could develop, own, and manage premium rental properties with exceptional guest experiences. I established Ocean Vista Properties as a subsidiary company, keeping my identity hidden through carefully structured limited liability corporations and trust arrangements. This legal privacy was initially about protecting my business from potential family interference, but it also allowed me to acquire properties without previous owners knowing my history or background. My first acquisition was a distressed beachfront property in Folly Beach that previous owners had nearly lost to foreclosure. I purchased it for $450,000, spent another $300,000 on complete renovation, and created a luxury vacation rental that generated over $120,000 annually in rental income. The success of that first property led to strategic acquisitions along the South Carolina coast. I targeted undervalued beachfront properties with potential for transformation into high-end vacation rentals. My construction expertise allowed me to renovate efficiently, while my hospitality training ensured guest experiences that generated excellent reviews and repeat bookings. 3 years ago, I made my most significant acquisition, a 6,000 square foot oceanfront mansion in Myrtle Beach that had been on the market for 8 months. The previous owners had built the property as their dream home but were forced to sell due to business bankruptcy. The asking price was $1.8 million for a property that would cost over $3 million to build new. I purchased the mansion through Ocean Vista Properties for $1.4 million and spent another $400,000 creating the ultimate vacation rental experience. The property featured 8 bedrooms, 10 bathrooms, a chef-grade kitchen with professional appliances, a wine cellar, infinity pool, private beach access, and panoramic ocean views from every room. The transformation was my masterpiece of design and craftsmanship. I installed smart home technology, luxury furnishings, and amenities that rivaled 5-star resorts. The property could accommodate up to 20 guests in absolute comfort with rates starting at $800 per night during peak season. Within 18 months of completion, the Myrtle Beach property became my most successful rental, generating over $200,000 annually while maintaining a 98% occupancy rate. Guests regularly left reviews calling it the most beautiful vacation home they had ever experienced. I now owned 7 luxury vacation properties, worth over $8 million combined. My construction company continued growing with 43 employees and annual revenue exceeding $12 million. Every worker received above-market wages, comprehensive benefits, and profit-sharing bonuses that averaged over $5,000 per employee each year. But success meant nothing without people to share it with, and I had spent 12 years building wealth while remaining completely isolated from my family. I followed their struggles through public records and industry connections, learning that Thompson Construction had faced mounting legal troubles, declining contracts, and severe financial stress for the past 3 years. I knew my family could barely afford this reunion, pooling resources from multiple households to rent what they believed was their dream vacation spot. The irony was almost too perfect. The family that had disowned me for demanding ethical business practices would soon be vacationing in luxury I had created through the very principles they had rejected. Through my extensive network in the South Carolina construction industry, I had been quietly monitoring my family's situation for years. What I discovered painted a devastating picture of pride leading to downfall, with Thompson Construction spiraling toward complete collapse despite my father's desperate attempts to maintain appearances. The legal troubles that began 3 years after my original reporting had never truly ended. Thompson Construction currently owed over $2 million in settlements from ongoing lawsuits related to construction defects, worker injury claims, and contract disputes. My father, Robert, now 68 years old with diabetes and high blood pressure, had been forced to mortgage the family home twice to keep the business operating. The beautiful colonial mansion where I had grown up was now leveraged to its maximum value, with monthly payments that exceeded their current income. My brother David's marriage had collapsed under the financial stress 18 months ago. His wife Jennifer had filed for divorce, citing David's angry outbursts, drinking problems, and inability to provide financial stability for their 2 young children. David now lived back home with our parents, sleeping in his childhood bedroom at 34 years old while paying child support he could barely afford. Michael had lost his house to foreclosure the previous year and was working as a subcontractor for companies that used to be our competitors. The man who once managed million-dollar projects now bid on small, residential repairs, desperate to earn enough for basic expenses. His wife Amanda worked double shifts at a nursing home while caring for their infant daughter, struggling to maintain their dignity despite obvious financial crisis. Uncle Frank, my father's younger brother, who had always worked as Thompson Construction's equipment manager, faced the potential loss of his farm after co-signing loans for company equipment that was now being repossessed. Aunt Linda had depleted her retirement savings, helping to cover business debts, hoping to protect the family legacy her late husband had helped build. The extended family's financial situation was equally dire. Multiple cousins had invested in Thompson Construction stock during better times, losing their savings when the company's value plummeted. Others had worked for the company and were now unemployed or underemployed, struggling to find work with a resume that included a business known throughout the region for legal troubles and ethical violations. Through property management industry contacts, I learned that my family had spent months searching for an affordable reunion venue that could accommodate their large extended family while maintaining some appearance of prosperity. Most beach houses large enough for 22 people cost between $3,000 and $5,000 per weekend, far beyond their combined resources. They had discovered my Myrtle Beach property through a last-minute booking discount offered when other guests canceled due to Hurricane Debbie's projected path. The storm ultimately changed course, but the cancellation allowed my family to book the property for $3,500 instead of the usual weekend rate of $6,000. Even at the reduced price, the reunion required financial contributions from every household. Aunt Linda liquidated her remaining retirement account, while Uncle Frank borrowed against his truck to contribute his share. Patricia had sold her jewelry collection, including her grandmother's pearl necklace and her own wedding ring upgrade from their 20th anniversary. The most heartbreaking detail I discovered was that My parents had been telling their entire community that they owned a beach house using photographs from my property's rental listing to impress neighbors, church members, and business associates. They had constructed an elaborate fiction about their financial recovery and ongoing success, claiming the beach house proved Thompson Construction had overcome its temporary difficulties. This lie had become so central to their social identity that backing down would expose the full extent of their financial collapse. The reunion was not just a family gathering, but a desperate attempt to maintain credibility with friends, community members, and potential business contacts who might be watching their social media posts and family photographs. I watched through my property's security cameras as my family began arriving Friday afternoon for their weekend stay. The system I had installed for guest safety and property protection now provided a window into their private struggles and dynamics. I observed their arguments about money, their stress about maintaining facades, and their bitter complaints about my 12-year absence from family events. My mother directed the unloading of cars with the same meticulous organization I remembered from childhood, but her movements seemed forced and exhausted. She had aged dramatically since I last saw her at a grocery store 3 years earlier, with gray hair and worry lines that spoke of chronic stress and sleepless nights. My father struggled with heavy luggage, pausing frequently to catch his breath and clutch his chest. The man who once lifted construction beams and worked 14-hour days now appeared frail and vulnerable, though he still barked orders at his sons with familiar authority. David and Michael moved with the defeated posture of men whose dreams had crumbled their faces, showing the bitterness and resentment that comes from watching younger, more successful competitors thrive while their family business collapsed. They complained constantly about government regulations, dishonest competitors, and economic conditions that made success impossible for honest contractors. But they never mentioned the ethical violations that had caused their troubles, instead clinging to a narrative that painted them as victims of forces beyond their control. Even in private conversation, they refused to acknowledge that their business practices had been wrong or that my original warnings might have prevented their downfall. The arriving relatives brought their own stories of struggle and disappointment. Cousins discussed unemployment, medical bills, and financial stress while trying to enjoy what everyone understood might be their last family reunion for many years. The adults spoke in hushed tones about bankruptcy, foreclosure, and the possibility that Thompson Construction might finally close permanently within the next 6 months. Through it all, they maintained their anger toward me, treating my absence as an ongoing betrayal rather than the consequence of their own choices 12 years earlier. They had rewritten history to portray me as the ungrateful son who abandoned his family during difficult times, conveniently forgetting that they had disowned me for trying to prevent the very problems now destroying them. I realized they saw this reunion as a final attempt to demonstrate family unity and continuing prosperity before their world completely collapsed. They had invested everything they had left into maintaining the illusion of success, unaware that they were performing this desperate charade in a property owned by the family member they had cast out for demanding the ethical standards that could have saved them. I spent Friday night at my neighboring property, a smaller beach house I owned 2 doors down from the main mansion. From this vantage point, I could observe my family's reunion weekend through high-resolution telescopic cameras and my comprehensive property management system that monitored all activities for security and guest services. Watching 22 family members arrive throughout Friday evening brought a flood of complex emotions. Children who had been toddlers when I was exiled now played as teenagers in my infinity pool, splashing and laughing without any knowledge of my existence. Young cousins born after my banishment explored my private beach building sandcastles, with parents who had taught them that Uncle Art was a family traitor who chose pride over loyalty. The adult conversations I observed through audio monitoring revealed the intricate web of relationships and grievances that had developed over 12 years of my absence. New spouses had heard heavily edited versions of my story, with most believing I had stolen company money or betrayed business secrets rather than reported ethical violations. They treated my exile as justified punishment for unspecified but serious wrongdoing. My teenage cousins knew nothing about me except vague references to a black sheep who had abandoned the family during crisis. When younger children asked about missing Uncle Art, adults quickly changed subjects or provided brief explanations about people who choose selfishness over family loyalty. The most painful moments involved my 91-year-old grandmother, Helen Thompson, who suffered from early-stage dementia that affected her short-term memory while leaving childhood and young adult memories intact. She repeatedly asked where Art was causing uncomfortable silence each time before someone distracted her with other topics. Her confusion highlighted how thoroughly my family had erased my existence from their narrative. Photo albums displayed around the house contained pictures from family events spanning 50 years, but any photographs that included me had been removed or carefully cropped. It was as if I had never been born, never shared holidays, and birthdays never been part of their history. Saturday morning brought clearer observation opportunities as my family spread across the property for breakfast and activities. I watched my father Robert attempt to grill bacon and eggs on my professional outdoor kitchen, struggling with chest pain he tried to hide from others. His movements were labored and cautious, suggesting serious health problems he was keeping private to avoid burdening family members who already faced overwhelming stress. My mother Patricia orchestrated meal preparation with her characteristic attention to detail, but I noticed her hands trembling as she arranged place settings and coordinated serving dishes. The woman who had once effortlessly managed dinner parties for 40 people now seemed overwhelmed by organizing breakfast for 22 relatives in a house that represented everything she had lost. The financial tensions became apparent during conversations about weekend activities and expenses. Several family members argued quietly about who would pay for groceries, restaurant meals, and entertainment costs that seemed modest to me, but represented significant strain for households already stretched beyond their means. Uncle Frank mentioned needing to check on his farm animals earlier than planned, avoiding eye contact, when others suggested he was making excuses to skip expensive group activities. Aunt Linda volunteered to cook every meal, rather than dining out claiming she enjoyed cooking, while actually trying to minimize costs that could force her to borrow money she did not have. The children sensed the adult stress without understanding its source, asking innocent questions that triggered defensive responses. 8-year-old Jacob David's son from his failed marriage asked why they could not come to the beach house more often if Grandpa owned it. David snapped that some things cost money, and little boys should not ask so many questions, causing Jacob to retreat in confused silence. The most heartbreaking conversation occurred Saturday afternoon when Jacob approached his grandfather with the pure curiosity of childhood. Grandpa Robert Daddy said Uncle Art was bad and left us. But why would he leave such a nice family? Did somebody hurt his feelings? Robert knelt down to Jacob's eye level, his voice heavy with emotion I had not heard in over a decade. Sometimes adults make choices that hurt people they love, son. Uncle Art decided that being right was more important than staying with his family. We tried to forgive him, but he chose a different path. Jacob considered this explanation seriously before asking the question that pierced my heart. But if Uncle Art said sorry, would he be allowed to come back? Maybe he misses us too. The gathered adults exchanged uncomfortable glances before David answered harshly. Some bridges get burned so badly they can never be rebuilt, Jacob. Uncle Art made his choice 12 years ago, and we all have to live with it. But Robert's expression suggested a different truth. For just a moment, I saw the father who had taught me to ride bicycles and throw baseballs, the man who had been proud of my academic achievements and business instincts, before our relationship shattered over ethical principles. He looked lost and tired, carrying burdens that extended far beyond financial problems. Saturday evening brought a formal family dinner in my dining room, with everyone dressed nicely and gathered around the table that could seat 24 people comfortably. Patricia had prepared her famous pot roast, using ingredients purchased at significant expense, determined to maintain family traditions despite changed circumstances. I watched my relatives toast family bonds and shared memories while sitting in my property, eating food prepared in my kitchen, and celebrating connections that deliberately excluded me. The irony was profound but also deeply sad, highlighting how pride and stubbornness had prevented healing that could have benefited everyone involved. As night fell, I observed family members settling into bedrooms I had personally designed and furnished. Children who shared DNA I would never know personally slept in beds I had chosen, while adults who had raised me but now treated me as dead rested in luxury I had created through the very principles they had rejected. The weekend was proceeding exactly as they had planned, a successful reunion that would provide photographs and memories to support their fiction of ongoing prosperity. They had no idea that their carefully constructed illusion was being performed on a stage owned by the family member whose exile had cost them the guidance that might have prevented their current desperation. But Sunday morning would bring a revelation that would shatter their comfortable lies and force them to confront truths they had spent 12 years avoiding. I had already made the decision that would change everything, knowing that some wounds could only heal after being fully exposed to light. Sunday morning dawned clear and beautiful, with gentle waves lapping against my private beach and seabirds calling across the pristine shoreline. My family members were enjoying coffee on the expansive deck, admiring ocean views that had cost me over $2 million to acquire and preserve when their carefully constructed weekend began its inevitable collapse. Jessica Martinez, my property manager for 3 years, arrived at 9:30 for a routine inspection and to address a minor maintenance issue with the hot tub's filtration system. She was a consummate professional who treated every guest interaction as an opportunity to ensure exceptional service, unaware that she was about to deliver the most dramatic revelation in my family's recent history. I watched through security cameras as Jessica approached the deck where my parents were enjoying their morning coffee in peaceful ignorance of their surroundings' true ownership. She wore her standard business attire and carried her tablet containing property details, guest information, and maintenance schedules that would soon transform their entire understanding of their situation. "Good morning. I hope everyone is having a wonderful stay," Jessica called out cheerfully as she climbed the deck steps. "I'm Jessica Martinez from Ocean Vista Property Management. I just need to check on a few things and make sure everything is perfect for your visit." Patricia immediately brightened, sensing an opportunity to reinforce their fabricated story about owning the property. "Oh, this house is absolutely magnificent. The owner has impeccable taste. We've been telling everyone back home about this incredible place." Jessica smiled warmly, clearly pleased by the compliment. "Thank you so much. The owner really does take tremendous pride in creating exceptional experiences for guests. He's quite young to have such an impressive real estate portfolio, but he's built everything from the ground up through hard work and ethical business practices." Robert, fishing for information to support their wealthy facade, leaned forward with practiced interest. "We were actually curious about the owner. Being in construction ourselves, we appreciate quality craftsmanship when we see it. This property represents serious investment and attention to detail." "Absolutely." Jessica responded enthusiastically, consulting her tablet for specific details. "The owner is a local businessman who started his construction company from nothing and built it into one of the most respected firms in South Carolina. His reputation for integrity and fair dealing has made him incredibly successful, especially compared to some contractors in this area who faced legal troubles for cutting corners." The casual reference to construction companies with legal troubles caused subtle tension among family members who understood exactly which businesses Jessica might be referencing. David and Michael exchanged uncomfortable glances while Robert's expression hardened slightly, though he maintained his polite demeanor. Patricia, still committed to their deception, pressed for more information. That sounds like the kind of business owner we'd love to know. Our family has been in construction for 30 years, so we really value working with people who share our commitment to quality and ethics. Would it be possible to meet him or at least know his name? We might have mutual connections in the industry. Jessica checked her tablet again, scrolling through owner information with professional efficiency. I think that would be wonderful. He's actually quite accessible and really enjoys meeting guests who appreciate his properties. Let me give you his details. She paused for a moment, reading carefully to ensure accuracy before looking up with a warm smile. The owner is Arthur Thompson. He runs Coastal Dreams Development and owns these properties through Ocean Vista Properties. Would you like me to see if he's available to stop by later today? The reaction was immediate and devastating. Patricia's coffee mug slipped from her hands, shattering against the deck in a spray of ceramic and liquid. Robert's face went completely white as he gripped the armrest of his chair, his mouth opening and closing soundlessly. David and Michael stood frozen in shock, their minds struggling to process information that contradicted everything they believed about their family situation. Uncle Frank whispered a prayer under his breath, while Aunt Linda covered her face with both hands. The younger family members looked around in confusion, sensing that something monumentally significant had happened, but unable to understand what could cause such dramatic reactions from adults who had been relaxed and happy moments earlier. Arthur Thompson. Patricia finally managed to whisper, her voice barely audible above the ocean breeze. Did you say Arthur Thompson owns this property? Jessica nodded pleasantly, unaware of the psychological devastation she had just unleashed. Yes, Arthur Thompson. He's really remarkable for someone in his early 30s. Built his company from scratch with a focus on treating workers fairly and using premium materials. Quite different from some of the older construction companies around here that have gotten into trouble for questionable practices. The family members stared at each other in stunned silence as the full implications crashed over them like tsunami waves. They were vacationing in my beach house. The son they had disowned for his ethical standards had become more successful than their entire extended family combined, and their elaborate fiction about owning this property had led them directly into the ultimate humiliation. Robert struggled to speak through his shock. His voice cracked and uncertain. Are you absolutely certain about the owner's name, Arthur Thompson? Completely certain, Jessica confirmed, still smiling. I've worked with him for 3 years. He's one of the most principled business owners I've ever known. Always puts guest satisfaction first and treats his employees like family. Really refreshing in an industry that sometimes attracts people who prioritize profits over people. The irony was crushing and undeniable. The family that had cast me out for demanding ethical business practices was now vacationing in luxury I had created by following exactly those principles they had rejected. The son they had painted as a naive idealist who would never succeed in the real world had built an empire while they spiraled toward bankruptcy. Michael finally found his voice, though it came out as a strangled croak. When you say Arthur Thompson, do you mean a young man, maybe 32 years old, dark hair, about 6 feet tall? Jessica's expression brightened with recognition. You know him, that's wonderful. Yes, that's exactly right. He's really hands-on with all his properties. I bet he'd love to know you're here. Should I call him right now? The suggestion sent panic through the assembled family members, who realized they were completely unprepared for a confrontation with the son and brother they had erased from their lives. They had spent 12 years convincing themselves that their rejection of my ethical concerns had been justified, that my subsequent silence proved they had been right to prioritize family loyalty over abstract principles. Now they faced undeniable evidence that their choices had been catastrophically wrong. The family member they had branded as a foolish idealist had achieved everything they had lost, built the success they had destroyed, and created the prosperity they had fantasized about while actually sliding into financial ruin. Patricia began sobbing uncontrollably as the full weight of their situation became clear. They had not only lost a son and brother, but they had lost the one person whose guidance might have saved their business and preserved their financial security. Their pride had cost them everything, and now they sat in the property of the man whose warnings they had ignored to their complete destruction. Jessica looked around in growing concern, realizing that her routine property visit had somehow triggered a family crisis of enormous proportions. Is everything all right? Should I call someone? You all look like you've seen a ghost. Indeed, they had seen a ghost, the ghost of the son they had destroyed, the brother they had erased, and the future they had thrown away through stubborn pride and ethical blindness. Their comfortable narrative about family loyalty and justified exile had just collapsed completely, leaving them to face the true consequences of their 12-year-old decision. The aftermath of Jessica's revelation created chaos that I watched unfold through my security cameras with a mixture of sadness and inevitability. My family exploded into fragments, their carefully maintained unity shattered by the cosmic irony of their situation. Patricia collapsed into uncontrollable sobbing, her hands shaking as she stared at the broken coffee mug that somehow symbolized their family's destruction. "How is this possible?" she wailed between gasps. "How could we end up in Art's house after 12 years of silence? How could this happen?" Robert paced the deck like a caged animal, his face cycling through shock, anger, and something that might have been shame before settling into defensive rage. "This has to be a setup. Somehow Art manipulated this situation to humiliate us. There's no way this is just coincidence." David immediately joined his father's paranoid speculation, unable to accept that blind chance had created their predicament. "He must have known we were coming here. Maybe he's been tracking our finances, waiting for the perfect opportunity to make us look like fools. This feels like revenge." But Michael, perhaps because his own fall had been the hardest, showed the first glimmer of honest recognition. Think about it realistically. How could Art have known we'd book this specific property? We didn't even know ourselves until last month when we found the discount listing. Uncle Frank sat in stunned silence, occasionally shaking his head as if trying to wake up from a nightmare. Aunt Linda whispered prayers under her breath, asking for guidance and forgiveness from a God who had apparently orchestrated the most perfectly ironic confrontation imaginable. The younger family members demanded explanations for the adult hysteria, forcing difficult conversations about family history that had been carefully hidden for over a decade. Teenage cousins learned for the first time that Uncle Art had not abandoned them voluntarily, but had been cast out for trying to protect the family business from legal troubles. 8-year-old Jacob asked the question that cut deepest. If Uncle Art owns this beautiful house, does that mean he's rich now? Why didn't we know he was successful? Why are we pretending to own his house? The questions forced adults to confront the elaborate lies they had constructed to protect their egos and social standing. They had spent years claiming that Art's exile proved their decision was correct, that his silence validated their choice to prioritize family loyalty over his naive ethical concerns. Now they faced evidence that their rejected son had achieved everything they had lost while building his success on the very principles they had mocked. The cognitive dissonance was overwhelming, forcing them to either admit their mistakes or double down on increasingly desperate justifications. Jessica, meanwhile, grew increasingly uncomfortable as she realized her innocent property visit had triggered what appeared to be a major family crisis. Perhaps I should come back later when everyone has had time to process this information. I can reach out to Arthur and let him know you're here. The suggestion of my immediate involvement sent fresh panic through my relatives, who realized they were completely unprepared for a confrontation with the son and brother they had treated as dead for 12 years. They had no script for this situation, no way to maintain their dignity while explaining why they were vacationing in property owned by their exiled family member. I made my decision at that moment, knowing that this revelation could either destroy my family completely or create an opportunity for healing that might never come again. I called Jessica and instructed her to inform my family that the owner would like to meet with them personally to ensure their stay was satisfactory. 30 minutes later, I walked up the beach path to my own front door wearing simple khakis and a navy polo shirt that suggested success without ostentation. I had practiced this moment in my mind for years, but nothing could have prepared me for the actual experience of facing family members who had erased me from their lives. My mother saw me first, her face transforming through recognition, longing, fear, and desperate hope in the span of seconds. She took a half step toward me before stopping uncertainly, unsure whether I would welcome her approach or reject her as completely as she had once rejected me. My father stood frozen, his expression cycling through emotions too complex to decode. The man who had given me ultimatums and demanded absolute loyalty now faced the son whose warnings could have saved everything he had lost. His pride warred with recognition of reality, creating visible internal conflict. David and Michael positioned themselves defensively, their body language suggesting they expected confrontation or attack. They had spent 12 years justifying their decision to support our father's choice, convincing themselves that family loyalty required rejecting my ethical concerns. Now they faced the uncomfortable truth that their loyalty had enabled the family's destruction. Uncle Frank removed his baseball cap in a gesture of respect that brought tears to my eyes. Aunt Linda clasped her hands together as if praying for divine intervention in a situation that required human courage to resolve. The children stared at me with open curiosity, seeing the mysterious Uncle Art, who had been transformed from family villain into successful property owner within the span of an hour. Their innocent interest provided the only uncomplicated emotion in a gathering heavy with 12 years of accumulated pain, pride, and regret. I spoke first, my voice calm despite the emotional storm raging inside me. I want you all to know that I've known about your reunion for a week, ever since Sarah called to tell me about it. I chose not to interfere because I wanted you to have a peaceful weekend together. The admission that I had known about their presence without seeking revenge or confrontation seemed to shock them more than my ownership of the property. They had expected anger demands for apologies or attempts to humiliate them further. Instead, they faced mature restraint from the family member they had branded as immature and selfish. I didn't plan this situation. I continued looking at each family member individually. I bought this property 6 months ago as a business investment. The fact that you chose to book it for your reunion is either the strangest coincidence in family history or evidence that the universe has a sense of irony. Patricia finally found her voice, though it came out as a broken whisper. Art, we had no idea. We were told this was just a rental property. We never imagined it belonged to you. The pain in her voice was real and deep, but it was also 12 years too late. I had needed her support when I was 20 years old and facing impossible choices between integrity and family acceptance. Her recognition of my success now felt hollow when measured against her failure to defend her son when it would have mattered. But I had not come for revenge or to relitigate past grievances. I had come because family bonds, however damaged, deserved one final chance at healing before pride and stubbornness destroyed them forever. I know you didn't plan this, I replied gently. The question now is what we do with this unexpected opportunity. We can pretend this meeting never happened and go back to our separate lives. Or we can try to have an honest conversation about what went wrong and whether anything can be fixed. The choice I offered was the same one my father had given me 12 years earlier, but with opposite implications. He had demanded I choose between my conscience and my family. I was asking them to choose between their pride and the possibility of redemption. Their response would determine whether my family could heal or whether this strange reunion would become their final goodbye. I guided my family into the living room I had designed for exactly these kinds of important conversations, with comfortable seating, arranged to encourage openness rather than confrontation. The panoramic ocean views through floor-to-ceiling windows created a peaceful backdrop for what would become the most crucial discussion in our family's recent history. My grandmother Helen, whose dementia had left her confused about current events, but clear about emotional connections, immediately brightened upon seeing me. "Arthur, there you are, sweetheart. I've been asking everyone where you've been. Come give your grandmother a hug." Her innocent joy cut through the tension like sunshine breaking through storm clouds. I embraced her carefully, feeling the fragility that comes with advanced age, but also the unconditional love that transcends family politics and grudges. In her arms, I was simply her grandson again, not the family outcast or successful businessman, just the boy she had taught to bake cookies and identify seashells. The other family members watched this reunion with varying degrees of emotion. Some seemed moved by the genuine affection between grandmother and grandson, while others appeared uncomfortable with evidence that family bonds could survive even deliberate destruction. I helped grandmother Helen into the most comfortable armchair before addressing the gathering with the honesty that had cost me everything 12 years earlier. "I need you all to understand something important. I didn't build this business empire to prove you wrong or to seek revenge for what happened. I succeeded because I followed the ethical principles that seemed right to me, regardless of their consequences." Robert shifted uncomfortably in his chair, his health problems evident in his labored breathing and pale complexion. The stress of their financial crisis had clearly taken a severe toll on his physical condition, adding urgency to our family's need for resolution. "Art, I know we made mistakes," he admitted quietly, his voice lacking the commanding authority I remembered from childhood. "Thompson Construction is facing bankruptcy. We owe over $2 million in legal settlements, and the bank is foreclosing on the family home next month. Everything your mother and I built over 30 years is gone." The admission represented a monumental shift for a man who had never acknowledged fault in any significant decision. I could see the effort it cost him to admit failure, particularly to the son whose warnings could have prevented their current desperation. Patricia wiped tears from her eyes as she found courage to speak her truth. "I was terrified when you brought us those reports about company practices. Change felt dangerous when everything seemed to be working fine financially. I thought protecting our family meant supporting your father's decisions, even when my heart told me you might be right." Her explanation helped me understand the fear that had driven her rejection of my concerns. She had seen potential disaster in ethical changes rather than recognizing the greater disaster that unethical practices would ultimately create. Her maternal instinct to protect had been misdirected but genuine. David struggled visibly before speaking, his voice heavy with accumulated bitterness and regret. "I convinced myself that you were just naive about how business really works. It was easier to believe that than to admit our practices were wrong. When you left and we kept making money for a few years, I thought we had proven you wrong." Michael nodded in painful agreement. "We told ourselves that your silence meant you had realized your mistake and were too proud to come back. It never occurred to us that you might be building something better while we destroyed what Dad had created. Their acknowledgments were progress, but I needed them to understand the complete picture of what their choices had cost, not just financially, but in human terms. The workers you underpaid had families to feed. The substandard materials you used put people at risk. The ethical shortcuts seemed profitable short-term, but they created liability and reputation damage that eventually destroyed everything." Uncle Frank spoke for the first time since my arrival, his voice rough with emotion. "We lost more than the business, Art. We lost the respect of our community, our self-respect, and most importantly, we lost you. The family has never been the same without our moral compass." His words carried weight, because Frank had always been the family member most committed to fairness and integrity in his personal relationships. His recognition that they had lost their ethical center when they rejected my concerns validated everything I had tried to tell them 12 years earlier. But I had not come to deliver lectures about past mistakes. I had come to offer something that might save what remained of our family before pride and stubbornness finished what financial crisis had started. I have a proposal for all of you. I announced, feeling the weight of decision that could change everything. Thompson Construction can merge with Coastal Dreams Development, maintaining the family name while adopting ethical business practices that will ensure long-term sustainability. Everyone who wants to stay involved can keep working, but with fair wages, quality materials, and honest dealing with clients. The offer stunned them into silence as they processed implications that extended far beyond immediate financial relief. I was proposing to save not just their business, but their ability to rebuild their lives with dignity and purpose. I'll personally cover the outstanding legal debts and mortgage payments. I continued, but only if the family commits to ethical operations and honest relationships going forward. No more cutting corners, no more worker exploitation, and no more lies about our capabilities or credentials. Robert's eyes filled with tears as he realized I was offering salvation without demanding humiliation in return. Art, that's incredibly generous, but what do you get out of this arrangement? You could buy any construction company you wanted instead of saving ours. I get my family back, I replied simply. Success means nothing without people to share it with. I've spent 12 years building wealth while feeling completely alone. Money can't replace the relationships I lost when you chose pride over principles. The emotional breakthrough came when 8-year-old Jacob broke away from his mother's protective grip and ran to me with the fearless affection of childhood. Uncle Art, does this mean you're not the bad guy anymore? Can you come to my birthday party next month? His innocent question crystallized everything we had lost and everything we might regain. I hugged him close while looking at the adults who had taught him to fear and reject me. I was never the bad guy, buddy. Sometimes adults make mistakes because they're scared or confused, but maybe we can all do better from now on. Patricia's dam finally burst completely as she sobbed with relief, guilt, and desperate hope. Art, can you ever forgive us? We were so wrong about everything. We lost the best part of our family because we were too proud and scared to listen to our own son. David approached hesitantly before extending his hand in a gesture that acknowledged our adult status and mutual respect. Brother, I owe you an apology that's 12 years overdue. You were right about the business, right about ethics, and right to choose your principles over our approval. Michael followed with his own apology, his voice breaking, as he admitted the full scope of their mistakes. We blamed you for every problem that followed your departure, instead of recognizing that you had tried to save us from exactly the disasters we experienced. Your warnings were a gift we were too stubborn to accept. The reunion weekend transformed from desperate performance into genuine reconciliation as family members began sharing honest stories about their struggles, regrets, and hopes for rebuilding relationships based on truth rather than comfortable illusions. I established college funds for all the children and offered positions in the merged company for every adult who wanted to participate in ethical construction and development. Most importantly, I insisted that future family gatherings would include open communication about problems and honest acknowledgement of mistakes rather than the pride-driven denial that had nearly destroyed us all. As Sunday evening approached and my family prepared to leave my property, the atmosphere had changed completely from their arrival. Instead of maintaining fiction about owning a beach house, they could honestly say they had been guests of their successful son and brother who had built his wealth through the integrity they had rejected but now embraced. The most meaningful moment came when my father asked for a private conversation as others loaded cars and exchanged contact information for upcoming family events that would include me for the first time in 12 years. Art, I want you to know that your ethical standards weren't just right for business, they were right for family. he said quietly. I failed as a father when I gave you that ultimatum. A real man supports his son's conscience, even when it challenges his own choices. His apology meant everything because it acknowledged not just business mistakes, but the fundamental failure of putting pride above love. We embraced on the beach where I had spent countless childhood summers healing wounds that had seemed permanent and irreparable. 6 months later, Thompson Coastal Construction had become one of the most respected development companies in South Carolina, known for ethical practices, quality work, and fair treatment of employees. The merger had saved 17 jobs while creating 37 new positions for workers who appreciated honest wages and safe working conditions. My parents moved into a beautiful home I designed specifically for their needs, with accessibility features for my father's health challenges, and space for hosting family gatherings that now included everyone without exception. David and Michael had rebuilt their confidence and marriages through meaningful work and financial stability that came from sustainable business practices. The greatest lesson I learned was that integrity often requires temporary isolation, while you prove your principles through actions rather than arguments. Families can heal from even the deepest wounds when members choose humility over pride and truth over comfortable lies. Success measured only in financial terms is meaningless, but success that includes positive impact on others creates the lasting fulfillment that money alone cannot provide. Sometimes the people who hurt us most are the ones who need our forgiveness most, and extending grace to them heals our own hearts in ways we never expected. My family had banned me from their reunion, but in the end I gave them something much more valuable than a weekend vacation. I gave them a chance to rebuild their lives with dignity, purpose, and the ethical foundation that should have guided us all along. True victory is not defeating your enemies, but transforming them into allies through the power of principled living and unconditional forgiveness. The beach house became a symbol not of my success over their failure, but of our family's capacity to choose love over pride and healing over revenge. Every family faces moments when principles clash with loyalty, when doing right seems to threaten relationships we value most. The key is remembering that real love supports conscience, even when it challenges comfort, and that temporary separation based on integrity can lead to stronger reunification than forced unity based on compromise. As I watched my nephew Jacob play on the same beach where I had learned to swim, I realized that the most important inheritance we give the next generation is not wealth or property, but the courage to choose right over easy, even when that choice costs us everything we think we want. The family that had once banned me from their reunion now gathers at my beach house every year, not as my guests but as participants in a legacy built on the foundation of ethical living, honest communication, and the understanding that true success includes everyone or it includes no one. What moments in your own life have required you to choose between principles and popularity? Have you ever discovered that standing alone for what's right eventually leads to standing with others who share your values? Share your experiences in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need encouragement to follow their conscience even when it's difficult. Thank you for listening to this journey of family forgiveness and the power of ethical living. Until next time, remember that the choices you make today determine the relationships you'll have tomorrow.